Elon University's Belk Library. And I'm also on the board with Lauren and several other folks who are here of our WGSS minor, which is generously supporting that along with Belk Library. So we're really, really excited to have Holly here, especially with our students, because we've been talking a lot about where we find different narratives. And I know especially our student Emily on here has been thinking a lot about science fiction and really amazing work done by Black feminists in terms of imagining different futures and telling different stories. So I'm really, really, really delighted that we have with us Holly Smith, who is the archivist at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. Holly's going to talk about the various collections that she works with, but in particular, she cares for the records of Audre Lorde. And the collections there are really, really interesting because they've been housed under a women's center. And so the whole way that they grew up is different from a lot of us who work in libraries. Holly, I love reading different bios about you because I just learned the other day that your initial interest came from doing work at Colonial Williamsburg at the age of 8, I believe. So that's a really good start in learning to do critical history and memory work, is to start at Williamsburg. Holly spent time here in North Carolina at UNC Chapel Hill, where she worked with a number of colleagues who are here from Wilson Library or Wilson Library via the internet. Holly also has a MLIS degree from Simmons College and studied history at Yale. So she comes from a whole bunch of different backgrounds, and she's landed at this really unique women's HBCU in Atlanta. So I'm really excited to hear Holly talk about kind of her work with Audre Lorde's records, as well as what that means for those records to exist at a women's HBCU in Atlanta. I know we hear a lot about different kinds of Black feminist archives ending up in different places. Octavia Butler's have ended up at the Huntington, which is a very exclusive institution. Angela Davis's are at Harvard. So kind of really what that means for those records to have ended up at Spelman. And I also know, and many of us are here because Holly does such amazing work around radical empathy and love, and she does community really well. This is something my partner mentioned the other day as being a really important skill. And I think right now we're realizing in archives, certainly Lael Hughes-Watkins talks about this a lot, the importance of building relationships. And anyone who knows Holly knows that she is an expert at building those relationships, which is such a critical part of being able to create a space where people can process through important memory work. So I will stop talking and hand it to my dear friend and colleague, Holly Smith. And Lauren, can you record this?
Oh, I already am.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, isn't that the bane of the existence when it's like, you're on mute? Well, first of all, Libby knows how to pull your heartstrings and make you shed a tear or two. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I feel a little emotional right now, seeing the faces and friends, new and old, and people that I just love and miss very much, especially not only given this, the distance because of the pandemic, but just also the philosophical and all the other distances that we feel. And it's a very turbulent, emotional time. But spaces like this just really are affirming and a joy. So if you know me, my heart is a little tender. So if I shed a tear or two, But I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with showing love and emotion. And I think that's what's the unfortunate thing in, this profession, sometimes in others, this idea that you're supposed to be, unbiased and neutral and stock, but as a human being who feels, and particularly identifying as a Black woman in America, the I wouldn't want to not feel, I was about to say I don't have the luxury, but that's not the right word. In a world set up to destroy and deny your very existence, I think surviving and thriving is resistance. And, to be able to feel the totality of emotions is a form of resistance and joy and love that can connect us. So I'm just so delighted for Lauren and my sister comrade Libby. We met in Archives. Archives, wait a minute. ALI stands for
Archive Leadership Institute.
Thank you. I was like, not literary. Y'all, please forgive me. If you know me, this is truly authentic. I was like, it's something with an L. But Archive, the Leadership Institute and there's just some people that you gravitate and just love right away because their authenticity is just so genuine and real. So it is always a joy to and any invitation from Libby gets an immediate yes, because she just is she's not an ally, she's an accomplice, and she's a true beloved sister and comrade. So but in the interest of kicking off what I know will be a discussion and not just me talking, I do have a brief presentation, a slideshow to show some images. And I'm so glad to see some of my other comrades whose work I will amplify later in the presentation, looking at Stephen Booth. So hopefully he can stay with us. And if not, no worries. I just really want to also amplify the work of that Stephen, Stacy, and some of our Chicago comrades have been doing later. And I hope we can have room for discussion. And again, very thankful to all the students, my colleagues from Chapel Hill. I get in trouble if I start calling names, I guess. Am I missing anybody? But, in the midst of all the craziness that went on there, among the colleagues, we just had a lot of true love and care for each other. And again, to all the students, I thank you for, I know this is a challenging time for everyone, for you all too. It's been a lot of disruption. So I'm really delighted that you all can be here. And before I really get started, I just want to take a moment to note that on our discussion and our call today are two of my colleagues, Dana Pry-Jones, who's the program coordinator at the Women's Center, and Dr. Beverly Guy-Sheftall, who is the founding director of the Women's Center. And if you know anything about Black feminism, particularly national and international, Dr. Guy-Sheftall is the foremother, the icon. Hi, Dana, I see you. And I joke and say I'm a disciple of Jesus and Beverly Guy-Sheftall, but really, I joke and say it took me months to be comfortable enough to call her Beverly. But Dr. Guy-Sheftall, while she is formidable, is one of the most genuine, compassionate, passionate people I know. And so I, again, want to really amplify my wonderful colleagues at the Women's Center. And we'll highlight some of the work that we're able to do together and go into that a little bit more. Hi, Bahati. So my other sister colleague, Dr. Bahati Kumba, who is the associate director. I'm sorry I didn't see you, Bahati. It's 2 pages of people, which is delightful. But Dr. Kumba is the associate director of the Women's Center, and we'll also discuss work that she has done in the Women's Center to highlight. So without further ado, because I'm a Southerner, I think that's another thing that unites us, those of us who like to talk talk and listen, hopefully, and share. I will go through just a presentation because I do, like Libby said, have some images and materials from the Audre Lorde collection that I would like to show and everyone to be able to really amplify what does it mean to have this collection of such an amazing, unapologetic Black lesbian warrior, mother poet, feminist in these, particular political times, and how her words really resonate and fit within a tradition that of I think of intellectual excellence, academic inquiry, passion, activism, complex relationships that existed among Black feminists, Black women, that are highlighted and amplified unapologetically in the Spelman archives. And that is due really in because of Dr. Guy Sheftall's desire to keep the archives at Spelman. So without further ado, and please do feel free to, ask questions or type them in. I don't want it to be a soliloquy. So I don't want to just keep going on without engaging. And again, so delighted to see friends new and old here. So I look forward to the discussion. So I will share my screen now. Okay, and everyone can see that okay? And again, the concert has just kicked off again, so I apologize in advance. Hopefully everyone can see me okay. So just to get started um, with a play on Audre Lorde, Sister Audre Lorde's Litany for Survival, just really thinking about what does it mean, again, for memory workers to be a Black memory worker in this transformative moment that we find ourselves in, again, in this tumultuous political climate, but that has also allowed and amplified the voices of, excuse me, a number of historically marginalized communities in very powerful ways. So in the spirit of Audre Lorde, just kicking off this discussion with an excerpt from A Litany for Survival, and if you pardon me while I read it. And when the sun rises, we are afraid. It might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid. It might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcome. But when we are silent, but when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. And I think that's one of the most powerful passages, again, about the idea of the importance of doing things. I believe Sister Audre Lorde said it, but others, that we can do things scared, but we're doing them in community, and we're doing them knowing that, again, this world is not set up to make a number of historically marginalized communities to survive. So carrying that spirit through our discussion today, I'm grateful for, again, this opportunity for me to speak personally, but to speak in honor of my diverse communities and the ancestors and all of us here today as well. So I'm assuming everyone might be familiar with Spelman College, but not to assume. Just a little bit of background. Spelman College was founded in 1881 as the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary, and has been in continuous operation since then, and actually became Spelman College in 1924. And along with Bennett College, which is also in North Carolina, are one of two existing colleges, institutes of higher education that were founded with the specific intent to educate women of the African diaspora. So a place with a very special history, a long history. So the archives, and again, one of my favorite pictures here at the bottom, Beverly, if you can see us, you can see this picture of you and Sister Alice Walker, one of my favorites, in addition to students at a dining hall at Packard Hall, 1900 on the top right. And I'm forgetting, that's a student lounge, actually. I'm forgetting what dorm right now. I have it in my notes, but I said, that's a mighty nice student lounge. But anyway, so the archives, like Libby was saying, are actually part of the Women's Resource and Research Center on campus. Throughout this discussion, you'll hear me refer to the Atlanta University Center, or AUC, which is the largest consortia of historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs. So there, and the AUC consists of Spelman, Morehouse, Clark, Atlanta, the Interdenominational Theological Center as well, and historically, as well as Morris Brown. So there is actually a separate library, Atlanta University Center Robert Woodruff Library, that has its own archive. which is amazing and wonderful. I believe they are the official repository for Clark and have a number of rich collections around Black communities in Atlanta, civil rights. And so we work closely with our colleagues there. But again, Dr. Guy Sheftall in 1981 wrote a proposal to keep the archives at Spelman. She was a visionary in that way after working on the centennial history to really want to have the archives on campus for accessibility for the students. And so the official archives as we know it was actually built and is incorporated currently into the Camille Cosby building. And so we are actually a part of the Women's Resource and Research Center, which is just an amazing partnership, relationship, love fest that I'll speak on more later. But because of that, in addition to being the institutional repository for the college, the Spelman Archives, we also have special collections to document women of the African diaspora and amplify research by and about Black women. So that kind of explains the charge and hopefully, will inform some of the discussion. Sometimes if people wonder, well, how exactly did Audre Lorde's papers come to Spelman? And we can talk more about that later. So the Women's Resource and Research Center, and again, this is Dr. Guy Sheftall, one of my favorite pictures at the beginning of each Toni Cade Bambara Scholar Activist Writer Collective, founded by my colleague, Dr. Kumba, that we'll talk more about. Beverly Guy Sheftall gives everyone a crash course in Toni Cade Bambara, who we'll talk about in just a moment. So this is her taking us all to school and reading from The Black Woman by Toni Cade Bambara. So again, the Women's Resource and Research Center, founded by Dr. Guy Sheftall in 1981, and it houses the Comparative Women's Studies program. And it really is the conscience and the space for radical progressive thought and action at Spelman College. There's a number, we're missing our community in person right now, but there have been a number of wonderful, rich programs, again, facilitated this semester, particularly as part of the Toni Cade Bambara Scholar Activist Collective. And the nice thing is that has been able to extend the reach of our wonderful, programs and community. And Dr. Kay is on the, if she's able to stay, I hope she's able to talk a little bit more about that at the end. But also the Women's Center also mentors students in Afrikiti, which is the LGBTQ advocacy group on campus, the Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance, and a number of student organizations that are really centered around progressive activity and social justice work. So to talk a little bit about the collections, this is just an overview of some of the types of collections we'll have at Spelman Archives as an introduction. So we do document, again, you'll see on the left side, that highlights the history of the institution. And what's so rich, I think, about when I think about institutions like HBCUs, I mean, of course, we know HBCUs were founded out of, segregation, Jim Crow, but there's also a desire for education, higher education in Black communities as well. So the rich things about HBCU history is you're not only getting a history of the institution, but you're often getting a history of the institution of Black history internationally that you will only find at that HBCU, as well as surrounding communities, faculty, students, staff, and constituents. So the collections at Spelman are extraordinarily rich in that way, like at all HBCUs, frankly, as well as records, of the presidents, but as well as having records and scrapbooks of students, the student newspaper. And to the left, you can see some of our special collections. Selma Burke is a noted artist who did the outline of the bust for the dime of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In my opinion, it's no recognition and not nearly enough credit. She traveled internationally, a wonderful collection there. And the Dobbs family is a very well noted and connected family in Atlanta who had 6 daughters who went to Spelman. So just to be able to see, again, that connection to Atlanta, to the AUC, to Spelman, and then what the sisters and their families were able to do is really rich. So that's just an overview of some of our materials as well. And to go over our publications, I again think this is again, some of the really rich content that you will see, again, not just what's going on at Spelman and the AUC, but internationally, the student newspapers, the Spotlight, because those have run, again, and still in print now, what was known as the Spelman Spotlight is now the Blueprint, and the Campus Mirror really served as the predecessor to the yearbook. So you're really getting things from a student's perspective. There'll be commencement photos, the last will and testament. I leave my sense of humor and my boyfriend to whoever, So from the lighthearted to talking about, the student newspaper, the Spotlight. That's one of my favorite publications because you're talking about everything from, the Miss Spelman pageant, what's going on to, visitation on campus, pushing it back against campus policies, reproductive justice, apartheid, civil rights. What does it mean to be a Black woman? And then, what's really neat is going back and seeing articles by Pearl Clegg or Tiari Jones or other alumni, and to see, that link now. So those are kind of my favorite, really. As well as the Messenger. And that's what the image from the right is when Dr. Janetta Cole, the first Black woman president of Spelman, was inaugurated. You can see all this amazing Black woman excellence and intellectual gathering here as well. So that's just really one of my favorite pictures. And I again want to take another moment to particularly amplify the Sage Journal. It was co-edited by Dr. Guy Sheftall and Dr. Patricia Bell Scott. And Beverly can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe it was the first. Oh yeah, sorry, Kari. I just saw the question. Nikki Giovanni was in that photograph. And I will go back because Bahati asked, my colleague asked if I could name everyone else. So if I miss anyone, gosh. So I know there's Sonia Sanchez, Pearl Clegg, Gwendolyn Brooks, Mari Evans. Let me move this tile here. Paula Giddens, Toni Cade Bambara, Pinky Gordon Lane. And I'm embarrassed to say, Bahati, I'm blanking on who this is. Oh, and you can also see it at the bottom, which is very helpful. If you can see that in the back. Louise Merriweather, goodness, thank you. I ask forgiveness for that temporary lack of knowledge, but you can also see in the caption. And if it's helpful, and if I can also share this later for everyone. So again, just to go back to Sage Journal, and this is where I say Beverly can correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say it really was the first journal to focus on a scholarly journal to focus on Black feminist thought, theory, research by and about Black women in this way. And just an amazingly rich treasure that ran twice a year for almost 10 years. And just really critical, amazing essays and engagement with scholars, students. It was a special student issue on women in science. And if this is accessible, I can also drop this link in the chat, but through a partnership with our colleagues at Harvard Schlesinger Library, it has now been digitized and available to access and search. So I'm happy to also drop that in the chat as well. But it's just, hearing from other scholars about how difficult it is to access Sage Journal, but there's the desire. We're really elated about the accessibility now. And another brief word about a project that we were lucky to be a partner on. Spelman was a partner with AUC Woodruff Library as the principal and with the Digital Library of Georgia as well as Morehouse to digitize a significant number of publications and images from the AUC schools, just really amplifying the materials in just a way that has become very wonderful and useful, particularly in this era of the pandemic where people can't travel. But there's quite a number of content, the publications I just mentioned, as well as a little over 1,000 photographs from the Spelman collections, looking at commencement, our wonderful drama and theater program historically, as well as presidents and the buildings and grounds. And again, these materials are freely accessible, downloadable. The texts have been OCR, so you can do keyword searches. And again, it's just a wonderful way to amplify the connectivity, but the richness of, the history of HBCUs and just the richness, the complexities, and the awareness of diverse Black communities. And I too am happy to drop that into the chat later. So another thing just that we really have been focusing on at Spelman, which is really important to critically engage, and to use what my sister colleague Skylar Hearn, she's the first person I ever really heard the term activating the archives. Again, because these materials, particularly when we think about, the history of Black women as we broadly define ourselves, have not been the priority, nor have they been brought to the forefront. So we work with a number of colleagues. That is my colleague, Professor Yasmin Espert to the right, with her museum studies class. There's a curatorial studies program at Spelman, which is wonderfully amazing at HBCU. And we've really connected with a number of different departments, which has been wonderful to connect with history and English. I was about to say not traditionally just history and English, but to connect with theater and dance, and again, the curatorial studies. So the particular students in Yasmin's class were coming and doing kind of an analysis of some of our artifact collections. Historian Sue Bailey Thurman had a doll collection where she made dolls, but also collected dolls internationally. So we pulled out some of those materials. We actually have Audre Lorde's wedding dress, which is, I really should have included a picture, and I'm happy to send later, because I think we have certain ideas about who Audre Lorde was, but it's a very interesting piece, not something you think she might choose. So anyway, to be able to also engage students with the collection and artifacts in that way has been really rich, and hopefully creates, some love and interest for research, and as well as to be able to see themselves in the documentation. And I've been just so pleased that the students themselves have been really excited about documenting their own stories in their own ways and what makes sense. So to be able to connect and collaborate with our students from this course instruction has been really exciting. And again, just a little bit about our collections. We are open to the students, faculty, staff of the AUC, and the public. So hopefully when when it is safe to do so, everyone will come running to Spelman. Not at one time, please. We have a small reading room. Please make an appointment, but we were happy and delighted to host you. And again, have been so thrilled to have scholars nationally and internationally from a variety of disciplines, for a variety of uses. I'm always really excited anytime someone visits, but when people can, utilize the Spelman collection, in I guess kind of really creative ways. We've had quite a number of writers to come in and be informed by their creative processes, whether it's a play, a poem, poems, multiple volume films. That's exciting too. And it's really exciting, I think, again, when I think of students who come in on their own, to inform their own creative work. Is not part of any assignment or anything. Or as one student told me, Miss Holly, I want to see something really old, like from the 70s. I was like, well, I've got my toe on the 70s there, but come on in. I'm like, hold on a minute there. But, and to their credit, 70s does seem old, but they were very excited to just see something from the archives. So that always makes me excited. So we are the proud repository. This really is one of my favorite collections of feminist writer, cultural worker, filmmaker, educator, Toni Cade Bambara. I immediately want everybody after this talk to go out and immediately read The Salt Eaters. I'm ashamed to say I just only recently read it. Her work is just transformative. And as Beverly and Bahati, my colleagues have really highlighted, I don't think Sister Toni gets enough credit or knowledge really as reading her as a feminist and her text as a feminist. So again, Toni Cade Bambara, cultural worker. I think one of her most well-known books is The Black Woman, an anthology, which came out in 1970. And to my understanding, again, Beverly and Bahati can speak more on that. It was just, yes, Gorilla, my love. Thank you, Stacy. Her writings and her short stories, they're really transformative and amazing. And she was unapologetically for Black people in the community. So to have her collection, it's a really rich collection. She was a genius to me because you could just see her creative process. She seemed to write on everything. So we have scraps of paper, napkins, draft. You can just really see the process. And her collection, Toni Cade really functions as an archivist. I said I wanted to write that type of piece because you can see the research that she did, particularly around her projects. I'm thinking specifically of the work that she did around the film The Bombing of Osage Avenue, when police in Philadelphia bombed the MOVE organization um, in 1980, I believe. So she compiled a ton of research notes. I believe that might be available on YouTube, but also if you want to order it, you can order it from Scribe, run by Louis Messiah, who is Toni Bambara's creative partner. So it's just it's the amount of research and artwork that she did on that, and also thinking of her work, Those Bones Are Not My Child, which was published after she passed away, by Toni Morrison, who was her editor. Just the amount of work and the drafts and the research to really see her work and process. And then in addition, you have personal things, cards, photographs of her daughter, her family. Yeah, it's just a very rich collection. Yeah, I feel very passionately and strongly about it. And she just, a brilliant culture worker is how she described herself. And also a plug here, and hopefully Dr. K can speak more on it later. So next March, during Toni Cade Bambara's birthday weekend, I can't recall really how it falls on. It's usually the March 25th and 26th. There will be a virtual Toni Cade Bambara Scholar Activist Conference. And we're hoping that Louis Messiah can either show the documentary he's doing about Toni Cade Bambara in part or in whole. So please sign up for the Women's Center listserv. You don't get a ton of spam, and you'll get really amazing content. So I can also drop, but if you email Women's Center at spelman.edu, you'll be in for a treat and can be aware of a lot of the programs that we are doing. And again, so this is about the Toni Cade Bambara Scholar Activist Conference. You can see my colleague, Dr. K, speaking in the Spelman Museum of Fine Art at the bottom there, as well as a beautiful program. So it began in 2001 and really co-initiated by another wonderful Spelman alum and colleague, Malika Redmond, who is executive director of Women Engage, progressive civic engagement voting rights organization. And it centers the work about, in honor of Toni Cade, by and about Black women. And it's always a wonderful gathering. And the content really, Dr. Kumba helps facilitate, but it is student run and student driven that comes out of those meetings with the Toni Cade Bambara Scholar Activist Collective. So we're delighted that we can at least connect virtually. And last but never least, we have, and I'm trying to keep an eye on time because there is some really rich content I want to make sure and go through and still engage with questions. So please feel free to, thank you, Bahati. 1985 was actually the MOVE bombing. I think I said 1980, so thank you for that. But last but certainly not least, we are the repository to the majority of the Audre Lorde collection. The Lesbian Her Story Archives in New York does have a collection of materials. I believe we have the bulk. And for those who don't know, Audre Lorde, lesbian feminist activist, writer, poet, educator, librarian. So just continuing on the work here. And I would certainly say Audre Lorde's collection is our most heavily used special collection. Again, we do have scholars traveling nationally, internationally, at least 4 or 5 times a week. We'll get an inquiry about using the papers. And these are, again, people from different disciplines, creative, artists, filmmakers, playwrights. So, and they're really looking to, use a variety of essays, poems, photographs, for a variety of things. And I think what is so particularly poignant about her collection is the relevancy to today, and really the power of her words. I personally found myself having to revisit the uses of anger the last few months because I found myself being very angry. And it's good to be angry, but then what happens so it doesn't consume you? So I just a reminder of coming in, back again to yourself, and how her words are very powerful in that way. So again, and there's no pressure if you're not overly familiar, but these are just some of her major works. Another spelling of my name, certainly the cancer journals, which is particularly poignant to see the drafts. I say poignant because one of the right words, it can be really heart-wrenching to, read the experiences of someone undergoing treatment for cancer and the pain. And then I think her desire to really want to make that accessible, particularly to Black women, particularly to lesbian, the Black lesbian experience of undergoing cancer treatment. So again, and then Sister Outsider collection essays is, of course, certainly her poetry. So again, I just wanted to, I'm sorry, that's cut off a little bit, I see there, but just want to take a minute to really highlight the work of Brenda Banks, one of my beloved mentors, and Carrie Cotton Williams, another mentor, two amazing sister archivists who actually processed the papers, and we were able to host them to really speak about their experiences. And Brenda's actually a Spelman alumna, and working with Beverly was really the one who crafted the space, and was just served for a time in the archives. And she's just an icon in the archives field. So to have her as a friend and mentor was just irreplaceable in my life. And she unfortunately passed in 2016. So we do this in her honor and to amplify her memory. But again, it was so wonderful to hear them talk about their experience of going to the collection, to pick up the collection in St. Croix, working with Dr. Gloria Joseph, an iconic feminist in her own right, and Audre Lorde's partner. And then what was it like to work together to process these, to go through these papers? The emotional toll of being a Black woman memory worker was pretty amazing. And then also another wonderful opportunity, there was a course, and I didn't have the exact dates, but perhaps my colleagues in the Women's Center can correct. There was a course co-taught for years before I arrived. I arrived at Spelman in 2014. So it was co-taught by Professor Opal Moore of the English department and Professor Jerry Weaver of sociology and anthropology. And it was centered on Audre Lorde, like the archives were helped to center the course. So in that sense, the students would read Audre Lorde's printed work and publications, but would come and engage in a research project of their choosing in the archives for across the semester. And at the end would do a presentation, their work. So again, it was really critical for that semester-long engagement with the archives. And again, being acquainted with Audre Lorde, but being also introduced to, just the idea of Black women's lives in archives, Black queer women in the archives. Like, what does that mean to have your experiences documented, and to know that you can see yourself in these materials? You have a right to come into the archives and engage with materials. That's number one. And again, I think some of those students who I mentioned who would come back for their own creative work, several of the students I met had come from that course and have gone on to do wonderful and amazing things broadly. So it was just a wonderful opportunity to have that course as well. So now to get into the crux of exploring some of the archival materials. So I will try to go through these promptly because I went a little haywire and was like, that's amazing. I gotta show that. So it's a bit of content. So if I move quickly, please feel free to let me know if I stop, or Libby or Lauren, if you want to give me a hand or shout. I'm trying to peg, to go over anything. But I think what I really would like to do in this moment, as we really talk through archiving Black women's memory and really looking through Audre Lorde, is just to get a glimpse of the breadth of her life and her experience. I think we tend to, I know I myself, when we think of people, we think of them how we know them, how they arrived, rather as complex, layered human beings with a childhood, adulthood. You make mistakes, you have fractured relationships, to really see the development. And I think one of the things is I've come to be as one of the stewards, right? Because we're all stewards, but as one of the stewards, come to appreciate just the richness and the breadth and the layers of her collection, particularly the journals and correspondence and drafts. I guess that's almost everything, but that I truly love to see the process and to just know that, see the transparency, humanity, someone like Audre Lorde. So I just really wanted to use this as an opportunity to amplify her in the archives, but as well, just to really expand on the richness and beauty and complexity of our lives as just Black women, and how we choose to document ourselves. So this first slide, I thought it was so interesting to have her passport photo. And Brenda and Carrie use this in her image. So, you see her previous spelling, Audre Geraldine Lorde. And she just looks so youthful there, as opposed, and then you see her with students in 1975. I'm not sure where this image was taken. I'm not sure if it was, I think it's likely in the US, possibly New York. But again, just, the graphic representation to really just kind of see her, grow. How do we all look? When I shudder when I look back at pictures of myself from a certain period in time. But again, there are quite a number of really, oh, thank you, Bahati. She mentioned it's possibly, that's what I was thinking, Hunter College. And Kara asked a good question, if we have audio archives of oral histories or stories reading their work. So that is also one thing. So there's a program called the Spelman Independent Scholars Program, run by Dr. Gloria Wade Gales, who's been at Spelman for again, another icon, who has really a class that teaches students, and they go out and interview elders, particularly Black women elders, but also elder women, particularly women of color. And so in Audre Lorde and Toni Cade Bambara's collection, we do have AV, and through a very generous allocation of funds from Dr. Gasheft on the Women's Center, we were able to get those digitized. So now, they're accessible in the reading room, not online yet, or, we'll see. But we do luckily have those materials. And we actually have quite a number of AV college collections that we're looking to get digitized, because you're right, there are a number of, speakers on campus that, rather than more so oral histories, you had people, like Marian Anderson, Langston Hughes coming to campus. I think that's another thing about HBCUs particularly that was so poignant. And so we do have a number of AV recordings that are in need of conversion. But the materials for Audre Lorde and Toni Cade have been digitized. And Louis was able to use quite a number of video and some audio as well. And I'm looking again, being mindful of time. I just happened to randomly realize I had a clip of Audre Lorde, some AV, so I can play that. I apologize, I'm not a good archivist. I really don't remember the exact context. I think I had just copied and I was doing something else with it. So, but I'm happy to so I'm not the best archivist, but I can find out where exactly it came from, and and we can actually hear her voice. So I can play that when I stop going on. So again, in the interest of time, I'm laughing at Libby. First of all, I'm so glad that I can see you and Shepard and Lauren, and I see Liz, so I can get some back and laughter, because I know I'm just kind of going on. But again, these beautiful images, Audre Lorde, and they're with the kitchen table press staff. You can see her at the right in Berlin, but also at left, she's just at the beach. And again, it's so wonderful to see her at the beach. I'm not sure where the beach, what beach it exactly is, but to be, my colleague Bahati said, I'm the best archivist. Only the best to you, Bahati. I mean, when you work with people you love and you work in Black Women's Heaven, like, it's not hard to me. That's what we call the Women's Center, I should say. I've shared that with everybody. But again, just, there's a number of pictures of Audre Lorde with Dr. Joseph, or, her children. She has two children, Dr. Lorde Rollins and her son, Jonathan Lorde Rollins, or, with her previous partner, Frances. And, she's a human being. You see her with her flowers in her garden. And I often wonder about the solace that it takes, especially to be in the garden when you're undergoing through, I was very grieved to hear how much pain she was really in the last few years of her life. So just, I often wonder what she's thinking, like when I see images like that. And I think that's why I tend to be drawn to the images in collections, because then you can actually see a visual representation of somebody. But yeah, and I don't know, I just really, again, another one where she's looking, you know, directly at the camera. And to my ignorance, I don't know if I knew that Audre Lorde spoke at the 20th anniversary of the March on Washington. Um, so to really find these images and to do a deep dive, again, was education and richness for me. And I think, it's indicative to the ways that women are intentionally or unintentionally screw up from the memory, like whose story gets or who gets amplified. Um, so, I think we all have a sense of awareness and, learning to do, myself included. So it was really great to see these images as well. So this right here, going into some of the relationships across Black women writers, and I hope everybody can see that okay. Tried to make it, large. So this is actually a poem that Audre Lorde wrote to Toni Cade Bambara in honor of her daughter, Karma. And at the beginning, it says, "Dear Toni, instead of a letter congratulating I think that should congratulate, a letter of congratulations upon your book and your daughter, whom you are raising to be a correct little sister." I love that. I just really love this, sign. And it's a poem, instead of a letter. I mean, how amazing is that to write a poem? And I think because Karma Bambara Smith, Toni's daughter, and her granddaughter, Zoe, who is already amazing activist and organizer in the spirit of her grandmother, Toni, because we have a great relationship with them and the family, and they come. I think knowing Karma and reading this and seeing the pictures, it's all the more special, So this, and you can, again, once again, you can see the connectivity and networks among, Black women, feminists, and writers. My friend and dear friend and colleague Gabrielle Dudley did an amazing exhibition called oh my goodness, why am I blanking? Again, forgive me, I'm having she gathers me, goodness, taking a line from Toni Morrison's Beloved, the line where she gathers me, talking about the relationships among Black women writers. So, and which is a beautiful exhibition. Which is over now, but it was a beautiful exhibition. And just again, to know and to see these relationships that exist among Black women writers, and the correspondence is very rich. So again, thinking of other letters and thinking about the relationships between Black, gay, and lesbian authors, here is a letter from Essex Hemphill. I don't know if y'all can see that too clearly. And again, I think, again, one of the wonderful things about the letters is they're not just about work, they're intensely personal as well. So he writes in the second paragraph, "Thank you for your blessings, Audre. They mean so much to me. When I returned from Chicago in early July, your letter was waiting for me. My health hasn't been the best of late either. So in Chicago, I wound up being hospitalized on an emergency basis for 7 days. My T cells are low. I had a nasty sinus infection and butt surgery." Sometimes it feels, it can feel a little invasive when you're reading these letters too. Almost that you're, really reading the intimate parts of someone's life and they wanted them shared. But the thing about the Audre Lorde papers, she wanted them to be open, and which is a rare treat, I think, in richness in that way. So you can again see the networks among other queer people of color, and again, Black and lesbian communities, Black, gay, and lesbian communities as well, and the fellowship. Again, not just as writers, but as friends. And again, so here's a letter from Barbara Smith on Kitchen Table Press. I believe if you can see up here, you can see a fax line. Who knows what a fax is? Right, exactly. Speaking of something from the 70s or old, But again, you can, I don't know, I just like the aspect, again, you can read, she's talking about a variety of things, personal and professional. And I just like this line here where she says, "This meeting was just great. We are doing it, Audre." So you can see the evolution of the work, you know, not only the press of Audre Lorde, of Barbara Smith, you can see the evolution of the work as well. And I don't know, again, just to find this treat from the first Black feminist retreat, and if we know the Combahee River Collective, it just made me stop in my tracks to see there's some notes. So this is a brief address that Audre Lorde gave at the first Black feminist retreat, and we know the powerful Combahee River Collective statement that came out of that. So again, to be able to see her words and her work at the Genesis is just pretty amazing. And there are quite a number of folders that relate to different retreats that the collective would have, as well as drafts. And again, thinking about, you know, the drafts and the process, this is a draft of The Erotic is Power. So you can see on the left are her handwritten notes. It's well typed. But again, the process, you know, how many people, I'd be interested, you know, when we have the discussion, how many people still write the notes as well. Oh, Bahati, you didn't know about this poem? I know I've told you about that poem. I'm sorry, maybe I should focus and not look at
I'm sorry. No, I've been educated. Thank you.
I'm sorry, everyone. You can see we're not formal at all. So I guess this is being recorded. I should probably focus, I guess. But this will be entertaining for whoever sees this later. So, oh, and thank you so much, Dana. I really do. I have the best, I'm sorry, I got the best colleagues, y'all, but I'm only a reflection of everyone. And going back to Sister Audre again, so this is still from The Erotic is Power. You can see now that this is obviously a typed draft, but you can still see her notes, the refining. I don't know. I really love drafts because it allows you to see the process. And again, you don't just, you know, she just didn't arrive at the erotic. I can't even imagine the kind of intellectual inquiry and the process and the discussions it took to even conceive of that idea to get at that. And I want to say, if throughout the collection, you can see the scattering. There might be a folder in drafts. There might be a folder in essays of the same work. Which again is just really fascinating because it sees the ongoing analysis and work that she was engaged in. So this again, just I think Audre Lorde and Toni Cade were wonderful archivists. This was from a folder related to the Combahee River Collective, 6 Black Women, Why Did They Die? As we asked that question, I'm forgetting exactly when this pamphlet came out, but in 2020, that's some of my anger because I could leave the house today and I'm perceived as a threat. And there's nothing that I'll do. No education will save you, whatever, as a black person, as a woman. And that's not lost, especially I think on Black people of color, queer and trans communities. It's, you know, so I think, you know, when you see things like this, and if you can see on the left is an idea about how to, you know, try to protect yourself collectively, about the idea of communities watching out for each other. It's still relevant. Again, I'm happy to send this PowerPoint around, you know, because this is still so relevant. And then their community resources organizing against the murders of 6 Black women. So again, the spirit of thread of organization and community and work. Yeah, and this is just also an event from that same folder. Again, kind of showing the community and relationship, social as well as work. And I just really like flyers as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I feel like I cut someone off. So again, the journals are really amazing. So this was just a from April 1980. And again, I think I was going through looking for something, but I just really like this particular piece right here. We become strong by doing what we need to be strong to do, for leaving evidence. Again, a very powerful, you just see these nuggets of wisdom and reclamation and really about the importance of leaving traces of yourself in whole or in part. So again, and leaving this legacy and leaving archives places and activating these spaces, and I mean, journals are very intimate, and they're open. Some people can choose to, and understandably restrict journals, but the collection is quite open in a way that's very unique. And so I believe there's anywhere, forgive me everyone, I'm blanking exactly, between 40 to 60 journals. So from I think the earliest late 40s to the 90s. So they're very rich. And speaking of journals, now these are typed journal entries for the cancer journals. Beginning, you can see at the top, there are journal entries. These are journal entries beginning 6 months after oh my goodness. I'm sorry, I can't write, the writing is a little small for my eyes. Radical for breast cancer. And so these are typed essays of written journals for the cancer journal. So even to think about and go through that process while she's undergoing cancer. I don't know, again, just to see the drafts and the writings, but with the words exactly is quite particularly sobering, but powerful. And so again, this was the serving like has a title page, really, I think, so again, it made me think, would this have been the original title of the experience? Black breast cancer, Black lesbian feminist experience. And so over here, October 10th, 1978, I want to write about the pain of waking up in a recovery room, which is worsened by that immediate sense of loss, or of going in and out of pain and shots, of the correct position for my arm to drain, or the euphoria of the second day, and how it's been downhill from there. So just really connecting Audre Lorde to Spelman, this was actually, and again, I'm a terrible archivist. I forgot to know which issue of the Messengers this came from. Terrible. Everyone can spank my archival hand later. But this was also an excerpt from when Audre Lorde came to speak at Spelman the second time. Again, our Dr. K and Dr. Gasheftal can speak. And I believe Audre Lorde would have been the first Black out lesbian to speak at Spelman. And when she first came in Bahati and Beverly, I'm blanking, it was not a good reception. From everything I understood and from what I've heard from Dr. Guy Sheftal as well. So when Dr. Janetta Cole came back, and she was, very close with Audre Lorde and her partner, Dr. Joseph, and really the reason the papers came to Spelman, she invited her back another time. And this is an excerpt from her speech there. And again, the messengers are available online. So you can read and download when I get you the correct one. Citation, terrible. But again, I just think about what did it mean to be, an out Black lesbian for Black gay students in the AUC, and to be on a campus, when we talk about, amplifying the experience of Black women. But, when you think about it now, what does that mean, in terms of being a Black woman, if you're a trans Black woman, a non-binary individual, even if that wouldn't have been the language people were using in 1988, it just really made me think of the powerful impact that it had to be. And even the first visit, even if that was not a warm reception, I believe Dr. K or maybe Bahati mentioned in a private meeting with some students, perhaps the second time with Dr. Cole, meeting at Dr. Janette Cole's house, one student just really, if I'm remembering correctly, was really, I think, in tears about what it meant. And coming to being comfortable with her own sexuality and recognizing her own experiences. So just again, thinking about the importance and breadth of recognizing Black womanness and non-binary individuals in all our experiences. What does that mean? Particularly in 1988, what does that mean now? So to finish up and give us time for a true discussion, I just wanted to also continue wrap up by talking about some of the other work that I'm personally engaged in or with my comrades at the archives to continue to amplify the lives and work of Audre, Lorde and other, they're just rich treasures throughout the whole collection. And some people are not as well known as, Audre Lorde, but to amplify their works and voices as well. So this has been an ongoing activity in Spelman's archives before I got there and continued, but recently, really in light of the COVID, the pandemic, the state sanctioned violence, particularly against Black people and people of color, and just knowing that there are a number of active and engaged students and alumni, put out a call on our Facebook page and to some other, constituents via email and other in social media, that we want to connect and collaborate on ways to document this activism. And we've been, getting some good feedback and questions. And I say collaborate because it would be a collaborative relationship to do so safely, particularly for current activists and organizers, in a safe, equitable, respectable way, as well as our current wonderful student groups on campus. And speaking of my sister colleague, Lael Hughes Watkins, just really thrilled to be working closely with Project Stand, which again, focuses on documenting past and current student activism collaboratively. And they actually have a wonderful toolkit on their website for student activists who are interested either in donating to archives or archiving their material considerations. So if you go to that website, and again, I'm happy to share these, you can access the toolkit. So like Libby was saying, just really thrilled to have been really introduced to this concept, radical empathy in the archives, now 3 years ago, in a wonderful article by Michelle Caswell and Marika Seifor from Human Rights to Feminist Ethics, Radical Empathy in the Archives. And I think they, really encapsulated well a lot of the things that I think myself and other, comrades, the type of work and engagement around being ethical, equitable archivists and operating on principles of connectivity and humanity and frankly, love. I think that word gets to be, feel like squishy or whatever, but you can operate in radical revolutionary love. If you truly love something, you want to see it better. So I really continue to appreciate their work. And so I'm happy to share the article, but it really just looks at Michelle and Marika look at the effective relationships and responsibilities of ethical archivists using a feminist ethics of care. So this just breaks the relationships down as well that we have, to the actual materials and the communities who use them, and taking that responsibility, I think, very seriously, understanding it's different, being critical of that, of our self-aware of ourselves. And then at the bottom, myself and several sister comrades, I think I saw Elvia on the call, my beloved sister here, and jump in if she likes. The relationship between each other as archivists. We need to, uphold and uplift each other when you're dealing with traumatic materials or things, that are upsetting, or you just get microaggressed in the worst way or macroaggressed. How do we relate to each other as well? And so that was us presenting in Portland. I love this picture. My sister colleague Kelly Wooten made this. And so we presented, and elated to say there will be a forthcoming issue of the Journal of Critical Library and Information Studies focused on radical empathy that some of the wonderful people on this call contributed. And a huge shout out to our brother colleague, Andrew Lau, who's the editor and who works extremely hard on this publication. It's been a joy to work with him, and it's been a learning curve for us, but we look forward to that coming out. And last but certainly not least, some of my sister colleagues here, I was really excited to be able to connect on this article with my sister colleagues, Shanae Moraine. Oh, I hope I made sure and updated. Yes, she is now the Digital Library of Georgia, Digital Library of America, excuse me. At the time of this presentation, she was at University of West Georgia, but she is doing amazing work around the Black Women's Suffrage Project, and we'll be presenting at the Well-Read Black Girl Symposium, which if you follow them on Instagram, you can see the outline there. And so we were able to write a piece together. Gosh, I wouldn't like 2 years ago. It's crazy to think about how the time flies. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. And that's the link, just about our identity as Black women, memory workers, embracing that identity. No, it's nothing to hide. People talk about playing identity politics. Well, I am who I am, and I show up as who I am. And why is that a negative thing? It's not. And especially when I'm working with communities that reflect and challenge those identities, but I don't ever want it to be assumed that I can't participate in, white supremacy, patriarchy, misogyny, homophobia, just because I'm a Black woman, because we, I had to be self-aware enough to realize that. And I think especially thinking about, I've had this conversation with other white colleagues who, if you're working in Black communities, it's like, just show up and be authentic. And if you're showing up in a community identify with, oftentimes don't go in talking, don't go in thinking you're going to present this project. Just people can see past transparency, and people don't like BS. I'm trying to watch my language. I know, again, this is being recorded, but why not? Let's put it on the record. So again, just to continue to amplify the voices and experiences of Black women memory workers as well as collections is something that I feel is critically important. And speaking of amplifying the works of my colleagues, I just want to highlight some of the wonderful projects that some of my beloved comrades and colleagues, the call to action, archiving state-sanctioned violence against Black people, came penned by a wonderful sister colleague, Zakiya Collier, that everybody here in this call, if you support Black communities and you support documenting this experience, it's open to anybody to just sign as a letter of support. And particularly if you're a Black memory worker and want to meet and connect, there's a way to do that as well. And I'm really excited because I see some of my wonderful colleagues from the Blacktivist Collective. Oh, just kidding, don't go there just yet. Okay, the Blacktivist Collective in Chicago, an amazing collective of amazing Black archivists in Chicago, amplifying and preserving work. So I would love if they feel, I hate to put people on the spot, but as a Southern person, I'm gonna say, but I'm gonna put you on the spot. Would like to speak about some of their amazing projects, and particularly highlighting the project right above, Lost Capture, just an exquisite and beautiful and powerful project that two of my family members and comrades, Stacy Williams and Stephen Booth, worked on, just and some reflected by some of our other wonderful, amazing colleagues, such as Stephen Fullwood, to write about what is, again, the experiences, memory workers, Black memory workers, what does it mean? So please do check that out. And again, some other wonderful projects and collectives, such as our Atlanta collective, the Atlanta Black Archives Alliance, Plateau People's Web Portal, People's Archive of Police Violence in Cleveland, Documenting Ferguson, and Documenting the Now, which also has space for archivists who want to support activists. You can sign up for that. So, and again, I'm happy to share these around to, again, further amplify the wonderful works of our colleagues. So in conclusion, 45 minutes later in my SpongeBob narrator voice, but I thank you all so much for your, interest and joy and wonderful commentary. And one of our researchers and colleagues sent me this when she was looking through Audre Lorde's journal in 1949. And I printed this out and actually put it above my desk because I found this to be a word. And she writes in 1949, take your time, everything will be all right. And something so simple yet so profound to see in the journal of one of the most iconic queer feminist thinkers of our time was humbling and was touching. And the fact it's almost like it's an aside. So I, thinking that she might have had to write that to herself in a moment. And I'm not sure what specifically might have been this related to, but it just reminds me of how personally that has become something in this particularly challenging but poignant season for self-reflection and growth, which is why I printed it out and put it over my desk as a reminder to just take your time. Everything will be all right. And so I leave you all with that powerful word and reminder for Audre Lorde. And I just thank you and am so appreciative again of Lauren and Libby and all my wonderful friends and colleagues, old and new. Please do feel free to email me. I'm also very easy to find. Not a lot of Black Hollies around. So if you look up Black Holly, not looking up Black Holly. If you look up Holly Smith at Spelman, this is going to be so entertaining to edit, Libby and Lauren, I hope. But I will stop the screen share now so that we can keep talking. And seriously, thank you all so much. I selfishly needed to be filled in this way too. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Holly. It is always amazing to spend time with you and learn from you. And we intentionally set this up to be as long or as little as we'd like. But it's the end of a big week, and we've got another one coming up. And I know that a lot of us just kind of wanted to be in space together. And I would love. There are so many amazing people on this call. If other folks want to jump in and share some of their work, or if other folks want to ask questions, I'm going to mute myself again. And we would love to see faces though too. If anyone wants to join and have a conversation, we'd love to see your face.
We got one really excellent question from a dear student of both Libby's and mine, from Emily Lang, during the talk. And I didn't want to interrupt you, but I did want to bring you back to the slide that Emily asked this question on. So she was asking, when we were looking at the draft, and I was also really interested in this, the draft of Lorde's uses of the erotic essay. And Emily, you can jump in and frame this for yourself too, but I thought it was a great question of, what can you see how Lorde's writing process worked in those documents? Does it seem like she wrote and then typed, and I don't know if Emily, if you want to add to that more specifically, but it was a great question.
I don't think I have much specifically. I was just interested in the relationship between the handwritten and the typed documents mainly.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. I just got a notification that my internet connection, and we've had some power outages. Am I back? Can everyone see me now?
Yeah, anyone not on the East Coast might not realize. Yeah, we've had some weather lately, so I think we've all been a little nervous
Thank you.
about stability.
Thankfully, it didn't do it to the end, I get right. But then we don't want to cut off our colleagues. So sorry about that. Hopefully everyone can hear me now. No, that's a great question. It's an excellent question, Emily. It's interesting to see because sometimes it can be a little, from everything that it looks like from my working of the papers and looking through it, it looks, oh, thank you, Sister State. Listen, like I said, again, please check out Lost Capture. Stacy, our colleagues in Chicago, Stacy Williams and Steve, are doing amazing work. They are just, and two amazing people. But Emily, back to, yeah, that it appears to be that there would be handwritten drafts and then possibly typed and edited from there. That's what it appears, kind of going through her drafts. And then sometimes you'll see, multiple drafts of the, like maybe she's working in more on more than one draft at once. You'll see a renumbering of the pages. Yeah, it appears to be that things, Audre might have written things long form and then typed typically. And again, I think of her in the same way as Toni Cade. Sometimes you can see, from what I've heard from scholars who've worked closely in the journals, closer than I have, you might even see drafts or beginnings of poems or essays in her journals too, which is really interesting to see. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, it was really striking on the one slide where there was a full page of handwritten notes and then just 2 or 3 lines of the typed. So it was, I was wondering if there was mostly a condensing of not only the space that the handwriting takes up, but the concepts themselves, or a sort of sharpening of the words.
That's really interesting. I think it sounds like you have to come spend some time in the papers, because that would be really interesting to see. I can say I don't feel as well versed enough in the analysis to, in the papers to know, but that's an excellent question. Honestly, yeah. So you have to come on down. But it really is really interesting. I don't know. I find drafts very interesting because I think, like you said, and I would be interested to really hear, from scholars and researchers who work closely with them, do they really see significant changes, like cutting chunks through the draft? Like, is it a radically different piece or it's more refining? Actually, I would really be interested to know that.
Holly, I have a question.
Yes.
So this collection was wide open?
So this, I should say, it is, there is nothing restricted.
Uh-huh.
In for the materials and the finding aids. Now, were there things that had to be pre-put, but there's no restriction in terms of coming and researching. And we work very closely with the state and the literary agency. A big shout out to the Charlotte Sheedy Literary Agency and Regula Noetsley, who is she is wonderful, because we sent her requests, probably 15 to 20 requests, and they have been really wonderful to work. So, the normal permissions piece, but things are open. And I find that really interesting. And I wish I could have had the opportunity to really talk to Sister Audre, and even to have the pleasure of visiting with Dr. Gloria Joseph. Beverly and I went to visit her in St. Croix. We had to go to St. Croix for work. Oh, well, but I just, right, exactly. I mean, but so really, it would have been, that would have been a question I would have loved to ask her. And then it just made me think in terms of being unfiltered, unapologetic, thinking of what did it mean to be, a Black woman, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, donating, pay, to really be transparent and want to be transparent about their experiences. But yeah, no, that's a great, and I think sometimes people are surprised, but there are no restrictions on the in the research.
I don't want to dominate the questions.
I have a question.
Yes, so everybody, Dr. Kumba, this is the co-director of the Women's Center, founder of the Toni Cade Bambara Scholar Activist Collective over the conference. Yes, Dr. K.
No, first I want to thank you for your presentation. And I just recently learned how to do a screenshot. So I can screenshots of all of the slides. I hope I have permission to do that.
Bahati, and I'm also happy to email you the slides.
Okay, yeah, you can do that too. Yeah, but you came to Spelman, and I just have to tell everyone that we are just so happy to have Holly as the archivist and in the Women's Center. And one of the things that you talked about even during your interview was community archiving, or kind of advocacy, or helping entities in the community that oftentimes don't have time and energy to organize their papers or their histories. I wondered if you could talk about some of that work you've been doing in Atlanta.
Absolutely. And again, just want to amplify Dr. K's work as an activist scholar. She's just amazing, and really, I think the work of the Women's Center is around engaging, not just the AUC community, but as students. And I think when our wonderful colleague, Dr. Nikki Lane, spoke last week, was it about 100 people who signed up? And about 120 for when Beverly gave her wonderful overview. So again, please sign up for the emails, and then you too can be a part of these conversations. But yes. Dr. K brings up a wonderful point, and I think, thinking again of the work that my wonderful family and comrades, the Black activists and other collectives do, and the Libyan, and I've talked a lot about the idea of, preserving materials overall, particularly thinking about, community organizations, individuals. Does that mean things have to come to Spelman or repository to be relevant? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So in thinking, like you said, trying to be just a good ethical person, who wants to be helpful, but serving as a archivist who cares about, justice work, our materials where, of course, they'll be preserved, but where the community will have access to them, where it's a collaborative relationship. What makes sense? So to, like my colleague, Dr. Kumba said, really to be more in consultation with individuals or community members who are thinking about placing their archives somewhere, or if they want to start their own archives. Thank you. I'm sorry. S.S. Schulman left. I was going to tell me he had an awesome background. It was like a cat in the background. Anyway.
We tell him that regularly. He knows, but thank you.
Yes, please extend. It was pretty amazing. But yes, Bahati, like you said, just so I think being able to work with some colleagues in the communities, in Atlanta, thinking about the connection with organizers, student groups particularly, and to be able to serve as a resource. So number one, to kind of talk to people and individuals about, well, if you want to, donate materials, this is what you have the right to ask and expect, these, realistic expectations. If they're interested in donating things to Spelman, like what does that entail? And, sometimes people, I remember there's a wonderful group, and if anyone is in Raleigh, please connect with me. It was Black Workers for Justice. And God's a Laughing House, who it's been a couple, we've still connected, but it's been a while. We connected through another friend, and they were really interested in building an archive. So we had some great conversations and went out. Unfortunately, my job ended and I left, and but we had conversations around, okay, if you're interested in creating an archive, this is kind of what it's going to look like, this is what you need, this is the reality of the funding, but to be able to be that collaborative resource, if that makes sense. I think, like you said, Bahati, because I think one of the worst things that I can do, not just as a Black woman memory worker, but period, is to replicate these same co-optive strategies that a lot of these institutions have done, particularly when thinking about collections from, I keep saying historically underrepresented, but like particularly Black-centered, indigenous communities, LGBTQ organizations, thinking about, what looks hot and niche now, this idea. And I say that, particularly to the students, in the class, when you're thinking about, archives and research, or anybody really, but as Libby said earlier, thinking about archives as power and who has the right to offer the opinion about what is relevant. The idea that something has to come through the door of a academic institution to be relevant. What's wrong with that view? Like, what is it rooted in? And does that privilege written records anyway? Somebody asked you great questions about recordings. But again, what about cloths, about quilts, about artifacts? Like, it's just the idea of like even critiquing and thinking about what construction archives and people are experts on their memory. We're not talking about getting the factual basis right, but if I remember an event this way, I have this experience, you are the expert on that. I'm not. So I don't need to be coming with any kind of hubris or arrogance, thinking that I'm going to tell you about your experience. What I can come with is a spirit of, transparency, openness, and a willingness to learn and to check myself. Oh, Stephen, don't make me laugh. Stephen and I preach like this together all the time. I get very frustrated again by this idea. One of my favorite things to say is that we're just passive keepers of dead records. That's one of the most erroneous and dangerous things that you can believe as an archivist. You are an active participant in constructing societal memory. Now, how are you going to do that ethically and responsibly? Anyway, again, I don't mean to go off, but again, the good thing about being in Black Women's Heaven, AKA the Women's Center, we have talks like this all the time. So again, please sign up for the Women's Center. Okay, I'm gonna stop preaching
Holly,
there.
have you read this one?
Yes, girl. If you all haven't read that, you know what though, Libby, it took me some time to get through it because there were times where it felt so painful. It felt painful because I saw myself as those young women, and the way that Dr. Hartman, you didn't see it behind? Libby, can you hold it up again, please?
Yeah.
You're on mute. Okay.
I just said thank you.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Actually, I think Bahati, like, so again, the classes in the Women's Center are just remarkable. And Bahati teaches a Black woman in the body class. That's wonderful. And I don't think I really articulated, but just want to say, oh, it's Lord, it's 4:30. And I know it's Friday. Who wants to hear me rambling on at 4:30? But just a final shout out to Bahati. He has an amazing class. And again, thinking about the TCB conference, the women is just very intentional about centering archives and memory. So Bahati, that's been a wonderful connection with the Women's Center, the collections there. But yeah, Sadia Hartman, that was it felt painful because, and then the idea that, when you see archives, a thing again about incarcerated women, about women arrested for prostitution. There is a wonderful book, Dr. LaShawn Harris, and I don't know if I have the title fully correct. I think it's Sex Workers, Psychics, but it's talking about the underground economy of Black women in New York, and it's a excellent, outstanding book, and troubling these archival sources, right? That are just going to tell you, well, so and so Holly Smith was arrested for vagrancy and prostitution in 1922, but you don't know the backstory. You don't know, and I think Professor Hartman does a wonderful job of reconstructing these stories and problematizing these views from a white male privilege gaze, in terms of like, these are the thank you so much, Stephen. Sex workers, psychics, and number runners, Black women in New York City's underground economy. I mean, and I think again, when you think centering the work not only of Black women scholars, queer scholars, about these works in these communities, but it was both of them. But just this idea of troubling the idea of what archives are. And I again, I don't want to keep going on a little over time, but please everyone be on the lookout. One of my sister colleagues, Julie Johnson, at Spelman, in collaboration with the theater department, and Julie is a professor in the dance and performance and choreography department, did an amazing project around the experiences of incarcerated individuals in Georgia. So if you look up Georgia Incarceration Project, and it was working with students, they worked with inmates in the state, to really, what does it mean to be incarcerated in Georgia? And now Julie, with other colleagues, are working on the experiences specifically around Black women incarcerated in Georgia historically. And I'm always delighted to connect with wonderful people. So, and there's a whole research and archival team to dig into, these resources, these archives, these logs, these histories, these testimonies, and to create creative works after that, which is really amazing. So again, if you go to juliejohnson.com, or I believe you can link to the Georgia Incarceration Project. And I don't know if you can link to this current project, but again, just some of the really amazing ways that memory and history are being utilized. All right, I wish we were all, that's like sitting together at some outdoor event. I don't really drink beer, but a nice cocktail. Stephen knows me, some nice food. Hey, Raquel. Hey, Jackie. Hey, Veronica. Hey, everybody. It's just, like I said, selfishly, this has been, I see you, Jackie. This is all going in the recording. No, like I said, yes, food and libations. I was sad about SAA being canceled just because I really wanted to go and be with my Chicago family and eat good food. But that's what it's about, community, So I truly do want to be, I know, Raquel, I'm ready. I'm just going to come when everything calms down, and we can say we're having a meeting. But I think I needed this selfishly too, to be in community with you all and the wonderful students. And I hope I haven't given the opportunity for the students to ask questions, but please do continue to be in touch with me or anything. And again, peruse the digital collections. And you see all these amazing people in this room. This is a group of amazing, wonderful, giving colleagues. I've never had the experience of anyone being like, don't waste my time, ask me no question, like I love to engage. And so if the students in the class have any questions or concerns or interests, please do be in touch with me. But this is an amazing group of people here. And again, Libby and Lauren, I will send you the PowerPoint if that's helpful. To please feel free to share.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you might have missed it in the chat, Holly, but our students are all planning a road trip when the pandemic ends to come to the papers. So
listen, we will make that happen. I mean, my dreams are, always like and there was a fantastic symposium. Love you, Stephen. Again, please check out the Lost Capture website. It's so beautiful and amazing. But yeah, let's do that. We can get money from somewhere.
I've been wanting to visit as well. So
yes.
I think that Lauren and I could easily learn to drive a big van for this, right?
mm-hmm. I think so.
Just kidding.
Yeah, I don't really.
Holly, so much. This has been so incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Any last questions from our students before we go? Anybody want to ask anything? Fewer people here, less stressful. No? Just checking. Holly, thank you so much. This was wonderful, and I'm so glad that I got to record it.
Thank you also to your colleagues for attending to provide all these other amazing stories about this. What a treat. Holy thank you all so much for ending the week so amazingly. I love you so much.
And again, in the spirit, we tell each other we love each other. So I love you, Libby, and all my wonderful colleagues here. I think I even saw my brother dip in, but we have been losing power. So I'm sorry, I think my brother had to leave. But again, truly sending everybody just love and blessings for safety, health, and sanity, especially next week and beyond. So I'm so glad we can be in community together today, and to be continued. Again, all the great work that everyone is doing, we'll continue to amplify it and care for each other.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Holly.